All right, we're live. Enlisted2Entrepreneur Challenge Day 4, Service and Support. So we are live once again on Zoom. The link is posted in the comments. We're also live on Clubhouse and on Facebook Live. Okay, so before we begin, again, hope that everyone had a chance to look at the previous 3 days recordings, those who were not able to join us live, and really take your time to go through the homework assignments that I prepared for the first 3 days. They should really start you on the path in the right direction on launching or growing your business online. And please don't hesitate sharing your work in the group so that we can get feedback from team members, and I can give you some feedback as well. We can go through it together. And if there are any questions, once again, on any of the materials previously taught, again, don't hesitate to put it up in the comments. So with that, we're going to start today's lesson, Day 4, Service and Support. First, I want to take you through the math of a 7-figure business. And then we're going to go through all the tools, skills, team members necessary to support that level of business, as well as the optimal legal structure and the financing and bootstrapping. Let's start with, what is $1 million? Is it a lot of money? I mean, in today's standard, $1 million, especially with the inflation in 2021, that's rapidly deteriorating in buying power. I think everybody would agree with that. So just for reference, I pulled up today's Canadian Department of National Defense regular force pay, and here it is. So for a sergeant, about $6,000 a month, or roughly 74 grand a year. So at that rate, it will take a sergeant in the Canadian Armed Forces about almost 14 years to generate $1 million in revenue. And that's before taxes and everything like that. And it'll probably get indexed to inflation and whatnot, so it'll probably be a little bit less than 14 years. But in general, we'll take this person to 14 years to bring in $1 million, and then pay all the deductions and taxes and everything from it. So it will take even longer to take $1 million home. And I vividly remember this story, and there's a reason why I picked a Canadian Forces sergeant. Is I was a young master corporal. I was teaching in the RCR infantry school. I was around 23, 24 years old, and I remember this conversation. There was this sergeant who was our platoon 2IC at the time, and he was just talking with other instructors, kind of one of the breaks that we had. And I don't know how the conversation started, but it was like, I vividly remember that sergeant. He was like older dude, like in his probably late 40s, like this grown man saying that he would be willing to go on live national television and eat a bowl of fecal matter on camera for $1 million in cash. And then like the young lieutenant, the platoon commander said, but come on, like, aren't you ashamed? Or you can get sick, and all kinds of bad things will happen to you. And the sergeant said, you know what, $1,000,000 buys a lot of mouthwash. Like, that was his response. And then he followed up by saying that, like, he calculated that at the time it would take him 20 years to make $1,000,000. So it was worth it for that person to go and kind of like embarrass himself that way in order to make that kind of money. And I think it's really sad, and it's not to discredit anything on the rates of pay in the Canadian Forces. It's just like that particular person was desperate, I would say, to achieve his goals, and he didn't know of a better way to achieve his goals than to go through something like that, which is probably unrealistic as well. So what is realistic? And in my opinion, this is what is realistic. And you've probably seen this infographic or some sort of a variation of it on social media. It's like, what does it take to make $1,000,000 in sales? And it's anywhere from getting 5,000 people buying a $200 product to getting 300 people to buy a product that's worth $3,000. And of course you can then take it to the extreme and say, well, you need to sell $1 product to 1,000,000 people. And you know what, this is actually our statistics from last year, and this is one of our ad accounts, and look, we generated almost 1,000,000 conversions and for a total value of $1.3 million. So it was basically a $1.3 per conversion. This was a software product, like a free software that we were getting paid commissions on, and look, totally possible. Or you can sell a 1,000,000 product to one person. This particular Porsche 918 Spider, at the time of the article in Bloomberg, it's probably worth more now. It was $1 million US. So there's a buyer for that car somewhere. All right. So basically anywhere in this range, you can be operating. And by the way, touching on my yesterday's lesson about growing the business by getting the customers to come back, recurring revenue is even better. Like you only really need 300 people to pay $300 a month for a year to make $1,000,000. And when you break it down like that, it all of a sudden becomes a bit more realistic. It's just like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Or like, how do you run a marathon? Well, it's like mentally break it up into kilometers. And how do people get through Hell Week in Navy SEAL Buds camp? Well, it's based on their interviews, it's let me get to breakfast, and let me get to lunch, let me get through this evolution, and this becomes all of a sudden more manageable. So like I'm showing you here, it is totally possible. There is definitely a Porsche dealer in Toronto that sold this car this year to someone, and here's our results from last year from one of our ad campaigns, and then everything in between. So it's you want more proof? Well, here's a book I actually recommend. You can buy it in a local bookstore. It's by Ryan Daniel Moran, and I took this snapshot as basically his whole philosophy. He's more on the like Amazon physical product selling side, but basically, if you have 3 to 5 products, an average price point of $30 per, each selling 25-30 sales per day, you have $1 million business. And he says when he tells people the simple formula, they don't believe him. But it is true. And again, that is not the only way. Like we had a single product Shopify store that did $2 million in sales in 18 months. But anywhere in that range from $1 to $1 million, like you are going to operate. Like it's totally possible. So here's another way of doing it. And how to get that many customers? Well, here's the thing. Like everything in life is a funnel. I just obviously I've been involved with ClickFunnels and this, just sales marketing funnels world for a long time, but also like I just heard a TED talk by the guy who founded Patreon, which you probably heard of, and he was I think he was a musician, and he says everything in life is a funnel. So like this musician made like something like 10,000 songs. He wrote 10,000 songs, that like only like 1,000 of those songs actually made it into production, and only like 100 of them made it into an album, and then like 2 of them got an Emmy nomination or whatever, like Grammy. So it is a funnel, and here's, if you Google marketing funnel, you will find all kinds of different similar looking infographics. I think this one is an official one from Amazon.com. Essentially, you need a lot of people who are just like getting mildly interested in what you have to offer, and eventually a small fraction of them will become your customers. So that's how it works. Everything in life is that way if you think about it. So on average, if you think back to the Pareto principle, the 80-20 principle, like basically it's like, in every group of 100 people, only 20% will be interested in what you've got to offer. Out of that 20%, only 20% or so will actually purchase. So you need enough people for the 20 of the 20 to matter. So conservatively divided by 2, like anything on the internet, you would expect a 2% conversion rate to be a good conversion. Like for example, it's common for like Shopify e-commerce stores to be converting at 2%. That's considered okay. Of course, there are exceptions, like any other rule. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. Like in the previous screenshot, you just saw that we converted that campaign at 8%. But in general, like very broad strokes, you need 100 people to make 2 sales, roughly. And again, it depends how good you are, how good your offer is, and how good the quality of the prospects that go in the funnel is, and many, many different factors. But equipped with this method, you can then, going back to the sales process, you can actually estimate, realistically, the number of customers needed to make the number of sales you need to reach your goals. So, remember, find where your customers are, figure out what they're doing, and get in front of them. So this will tell you how many people you need to get in front of with your offer in order to achieve your goals, right? And it's like a lot of people when they start a business, and I was just talking to a buddy of mine about that people come to me, yeah, man, I want to like start a t-shirt business, and I know why. Well, t-shirts are cool, and I want to make a lot of money. Well, do you know how many t-shirts you need to sell to make a lot of money? And then like, no, I don't. And yeah, like, I mean, you can kind of figure out that t-shirt is whatever, 25, 40 bucks, and then how many of those sales you need to get to your goals. And then of course I talked about $1 million revenue, but then of course you have the costs of goods sold, overhead, fulfillment, taxes, and everything. So really working backwards would allow you to calculate what kind of numbers you need to hit. But also I believe that breaking it down like that actually makes it realistic, achievable in your mind. First of all, that all of a sudden this like $1 million 7-figure doesn't seem like a far-fetched number. Actually, you can figure out exactly how to get to it. So I hope this lesson has opened your eyes and change your mindset a little bit. So with that, we're going to switch gears and go into the more service and support type information, which is going to be the tools, the skills, the team members, finance and legal structure of the business. And I want to address the legal structure first. So I'm not a lawyer, first of all, so this is not legal advice, but what kind of legal structure do I need? Who cares? Just start. It's just like, you don't need a logo to start your business. You don't need business cards. You need a proof of concept. So like I see a lot of this misinformation out there. It's like people just starting out in business, and then these like gurus or consultants say, well, you need a professional logo and you need business cards. And you know what? I know plenty of people who made a lot of money without a logo, without a website, without business cards, without anything. They just had an offer and they knew how to sell it. Like, that's your first job, is to get the proof of concept that you can sell the stuff that you want to offer. Everything else you can do after, because the last thing you want to do is spend months writing business plans, getting registrations, permits, and tweaking your logo, tweaking your website, and then never launch, or launch and it just falls flat on the face because you offer something, right? So I'm the proponent of doing it this way: is get the proof of concept first, ideally get some money in, and then take care of everything. Well, that said, do try to incorporate as soon as possible to create a layer of protection against liability, just in case something goes wrong, you get sued, or there's some sort of a loss involved. So you want to create that additional layer of protection so you don't lose any of your own personal assets, right? So, and seriously, I learned is to have an operating company and then layer it under a holding corporation. Okay, apologies, not sure what happened, so make sure you watch part 1, and where I talk about the mathematics behind a 7-figure business and $1 million in revenue. Part 2 is the tools, the skills, the teams, the financing, and legal structure. So once again, legal structure, like I said, try to incorporate as soon as possible, but don't get bogged down into all of the minutia and stuff. Get the proof of concept. That's my personal opinion, is get some traction, get momentum, and then take care of everything quickly after. So again, operating company under a holding company is ideal. Again, it's going to cost you quite a bit of money to set it all up. So probably not critical to have it right away, but that's something you want to move towards. Make sure you get your books and taxes in order early on. So like, last thing you want is it's year end and then you have like no records, and then you scramble to file and you end up with some sort of a penalty or whatever. So keep your books in order, and get help from a professional bookkeeper and accountant early on. Again, once you have revenue, ideally. And also another reason why you want to incorporate soon is that it makes it easier to qualify for things like getting payment processing or things of that nature. Get a business PayPal account, for instance, right? Like you can probably again start using just personal stuff like I did. I was a sole proprietor for a couple of years until I incorporated. So yeah, you can still do it, but it just makes things easier when you're like a legitimate business, because certain services and tools, they will ask you for your kind of like incorporation documents or in order to qualify. Okay, so again, not a lawyer, not legal advice, but essentially don't get bogged down unless your business is something that actually needs like extensive permitting. Then of course you need some legal counsel. But anyways, financing versus bootstrapping. So bootstrapping, if you are not familiar with the term, it's basically self-financing, like using your own resources, basically going into your savings account, your credit cards, loans at the bank, whatever. I bootstrapped all of my ventures. I've never raised capital, so I don't have experience raising capital or getting investors. And with that, like I often see like, oh, I want to start this business, like where can I get a loan? And I would recommend asking yourself first, do I need this money and why? And what I mean by that is there's this story that, again, I mentioned Jay Abraham as one of the marketing and business gurus that I follow, and he has this story that he kind of has beaten to death. But he was in China at a seminar for local business owners, and one person in the audience had questions like, none of the banks will lend me money because I'm a small motorcycle manufacturer. I need the money and nobody will lend. So Jay says, well, why do you need the money? And the person says, well, I want to expand. I want to build more. Like I want to grow, and I need find new, buy new equipment and find new manufacturing space. And Jay says, well, your problem or the solution to your problem is someone else's problem. Why don't you find somebody who has that equipment and manufacturing space that's underutilized and strike a deal with them, someone who already has the infrastructure in place, and see if you can get away with not having to borrow to implement it all yourself. And then a year later or whatever, 3 years later, Jay is back in China, sees the same man in the audience, and the man says, I want to thank you, Jay, so much. Why? Because like he found something like a lawnmower manufacturer in Indonesia that basically had all of this unused capacity. So the Chinese business man just brought all of his tools and dies and everything over. They quickly retooled and started manufacturing in Indonesia, and the lawnmower manufacturer already had connections with all the equipment dealers, so they were able to put the motorcycles into retail dealerships right away, and basically this guy didn't have to borrow anything. It was just like a joint venture. So if you think about that like that, then maybe you don't need to borrow capital for what you need to do. Plus, again, with online business, the business models that I'm familiar with, like really the starting capital is minimal to none. Like you don't need much to start an agency when it's just you providing a service to someone initially. If you're in e-commerce, initially you typically don't even need to take on inventory. You can get start with drop shipping or try to get it on consignment. There's ways around it, right, where you don't have to have all of that money. You can be creative. But if you do need money, there definitely are sources where you can get. There's some sort of small business programs at banks. Then the government usually has certain grants and credits, especially for veterans. I know in the US they have like SBA loans and stuff like that. Here in Canada we also have, like, depends on what industry you're in. Like let's say there's like province of Ontario has a lot of like media credits. So if you're doing anything with like video game production, you can get credits for free from the provincial government to fund your stuff, right? There's also grants for hiring apprentices, for all kinds of things. Like you got to look into it. And I know, for example, for e-commerce, there's a big Canadian success story. It used to be called Clearbank, now it's Clearco. I've met one of the co-founders briefly at a local event, and one of the things they do is they invest into e-commerce startups. I think there's a certain hefty interest that comes with it, but you got to consider it. But in general, I think with these internet businesses, you can pretty much bootstrap using just nothing but your credit card and a little bit of cash. All right. Now, we mentioned some of the skills that you need to either acquire or maybe hire in order to be successful in business, and especially online. And some of it is like hands-on online stuff, but some of it is more like selling and copywriting. Like that's a skill that will be great just in life. Like even if you end up applying for jobs, you can use some copywriting in order to more effectively write your cover letter and resume, if anything, right? Like in selling, you're always selling something to your boss, selling to your kids, to your spouse. Those are good life skills to have. And then something hands-on, like Google Analytics or TikTok ads. That's a skill that you need to acquire technically. So how did I learn my skills? I'm going to talk about the skills that I possess. So for instance, Google ads, right? I mentioned how I started in 2007. I basically learned most of what I know from this book. It was Terry Marshall. Um, it changed the name a little bit, but this is the latest edition. You can find it on Amazon, and it's going to give you most of the stuff that you need to know to get started. And I recommend going through official training from Google. It's called Skillshop. Just because then once you finish it, you can get that certification badge, which gives you a little bit of clout. Are you going to learn everything you need to know from the Skillshop? No, there's certain things that you need to pick up from the books. But also, I'm not going to give you anything that's like hundreds or thousands of dollars. Like, I'm not going to recommend any like cool high-speed courses for like 2, 3, 5 grand. I mean, there are those. I'm not going to point you to them. That's totally up to you, but I literally learn everything I know from simple, either free or low-cost things like books, right? So Facebook ads, I would recommend going through the Facebook Blueprint. It's also their official training, and it will give you the foundational basics, and also the ability to take the exam and get that certification badge. Now, I don't have any books to recommend for Facebook because I haven't learned it from books. It was mostly just following different influencers online. So there's this YouTube channel that is by Deepesh Mandalia. It's a fella in the UK. I actually met him personally a couple of times. Very nice, great, awesome person just to be around. And we ended up purchasing one of his courses. I think it was like $3,000 US. Again, I'm not going to recommend the course because it's pretty hefty, but he's got a lot of content on YouTube that you can follow just to kind of beef up your fundamentals that you learn from the blueprint. And I mean, there are other people you can follow. One caveat is, you got to be careful who you listen to, especially like on sources like YouTube, and if they're trying to sell you something, or they're just simply teaching outdated tactics, just putting content out to get views up, right? So sometimes there's a lot of kind of like BS artists on the internet, so you have to kind of check your sources. But in general, I know if you go with this guy's content, like he's a friend of mine, and you're probably going to learn some stuff, right? Email marketing. So we are a Klaviyo partner. Klaviyo is a email system that is heavily geared towards e-commerce. I mean, there are others like Mailchimp, Aweber, but they have an academy, right? And I think if you open a free account, or like the lowest level account with Klaviyo, the training should be free. And they teach a lot of basics on like how to schedule like a Black Friday campaign, and how to like set up basic things like cart abandonment sequences. So again, it's more geared towards e-commerce, but that's a good start, and I think it's free. So that's email marketing. And of course, when you're advertising or marketing, you're going to be doing a lot of basically writing and persuasion, which stems from copywriting. Like, copywriting is basically a industry term that describes a way to become good with words, and basically it's salesmanship in print. I think I heard the phrase. So how do you learn copywriting? Well, two things you must do. One is read lots of books on copywriting, take courses or whatever, just learn. And then another very important thing is every self-respecting marketer that I know, they keep what's called a swipe file. In the military, we said time on recce seldom wasted. So, or recon for our American fellas. Basically, there's like a folder that I keep with ads, landing pages, anything that catches my attention while I'm just casually browsing the internet. Like, I have a lot of screenshots on my phone, everything. So like I'm browsing Instagram and there's an ad that catches my attention. I would like, why did it catch my attention? What are they doing? And I see a banner on, like when I go to read the news, which I don't really do, but why did this banner catch my attention, right? So you start noticing those things, and you save them. And actually, it was a funny story. Like I had one of the interns working for me, and he was basically a Google Ads intern, and I asked him once, like, so he asked me, like, what should I try for the next set of banner ads we're going to test for the software? I'm like, well, just, what kind of banners catch your attention when you browse the internet? It's like, oh, none, because I have an ad blocker on. I'm like, duh, you're you're an ads business and you have an ads blocker? No, 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 no. Uninstall it right away, at least on the work computer, and you learn from the competition and basically see what they do. And keeping a swipe file is a very effective way of teaching yourself copywriting. Actually, there's a resource called, I think it's called swiped.co. It's a collection of, it's basically like a public swipe file of like the copywriting classics, anywhere from like the 50s and 60s, from like print classics by like David Ogilvy and Caples and all the OGs, forefathers of direct response advertising, to like the biggest campaigns from like Agora and others that are in the modern era. So check it out. And speaking of books on copywriting, and again, I've read lots of books, but like the three that come to the top of my head that kind of will probably be a good intro are these three. So like Cash Advertising by Drew Eric Whitman. That's basically like a quick, easy read about some strategies and tactics used in the mostly print advertising, back in like 70s and 80s. Then there's this book called the Ad Week Copywriting Handbook by Joe Sugarman. That's also a very good, I found it a book filled with stories and examples and everything. And then one of the more recent ones that's called Copywriting Secrets by Jim Edwards. That's also a pretty simple, easy to use book that gives you like actionable steps and formulas and everything. But I mean, there's a ton of other books, like anything that you can get your hands on, from like the classics like David Ogilvy and John Caples, like all the original 20th century, middle of 20th century ad agency guys that shows like Mad Men are based on. Like that's what you want. And there's a few more recent ones. If you can get your hands on Eugene Schwartz, Breakthrough Advertising, I think it's I've heard a lot of good things about that. Anything by Jay Abraham is probably good. So if you see a book, it's like 20-30 bucks and it's 20 years of someone's experience, just buy it and just get into a habit of reading like 10-20 pages a day, and you'll get ahead very quickly. So with that, you can pick up a lot of front-end skills, like basically running some sort of ads, having some sort of a communication process with your tribe through email, and using language to your advantage by having some sort of copywriting basic skills. This should give you enough skills to be dangerous. And of course, then there's all the other things that we can touch on, like how to learn analytics, how to learn split testing, A/B testing. There's quite a lot of ground to cover, and I'm going to put together like a list of resources at the end of the week for the challenge, where you can actually dive deep into those resources on your own time. So after skills, here are some of the tools that you need in order to succeed with your business online. And for a website, I would recommend something simple. We are standardized on Shopify for our e-commerce, and I like ClickFunnels for anything that's like not e-commerce, because it's so simple. Like there's WordPress, there's all kinds of other platforms, there's Wix, but these are the two that I like and we've used extensively, and I think they're great. And even for beginners, and you don't need to be a hostage to a web designer or developer and pay them thousands of dollars when you're just starting out. Like You can do it later when you need like a really super professional, highly customized website. But initially, like I said, Shopify, I had two ladies, my friends' wives, started their own stores over a weekend. Just a basic free trial with a basic theme, and away you go. ClickFunnels, it's also very intuitive, all drag and drop, and there's plenty of people who made 7, 8, and even 9 figures using ClickFunnels funnels. And just to give you an example, like the website for this challenge, I was waiting for a contractor who promised to deliver it on WordPress, and I was waiting, and then they basically fell through on their promise, and I said, you know what, I got to get this done. So last Saturday at 8 in the morning, I fired up ClickFunnels, and at 11 I was done. So if you've seen the Enlisted2Entrepreneur.com, which some of you used to join, I've done that in 3 hours myself. And it requires no technical knowledge because it's all drag and drop visual. So if you get semi good with one of these tools, you're in business over a weekend easily. For email marketing, I already mentioned we like Klaviyo. We're a Klaviyo partner. Again, it's heavily geared towards e-commerce. So if you have a different type of business that is not e-commerce, you can probably choose another tool. Simple. It's called Autoresponder, but it's something that will allow you to keep an email list and communicate with them through different campaigns or automated flows. And as you can see, like it's really powerful. In case of e-commerce, you need to be generating 25 to 30% in revenue from email alone. Like that's an industry standard, right? Other things that I recommend, other tools, is analytics. So everybody heard the phrase, what gets measured gets managed. It's very important to have analytics in place, otherwise you're flying blind. So Google Analytics, it's free, and if you take some time to learn it a little bit deeper than just like the superficial level, you're actually going to be in high demand because a lot of people are struggling with that. The last thing you want to do is spend a bunch of money in ads and then you don't know where it went because you haven't been tracking. You don't know like how much, like which channel is bringing you the sales. Like here in this example, we got Google, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, organic, Bing, like, so it breaks it down nicely, like how many sales came from each source and what's the best converting source, right? In this case, YouTube was the highest converting, so that may give you actionable insights in order to go and do something like do more YouTube. Another thing is I call it free money, is testing and tracking, and also known as CRO, conversion rate optimization. So it's basically squeezing more revenue and conversions out of the traffic that you already have, right? So like I said in the beginning, an average Shopify store is considering 2% as a good conversion rate, but imagine if you take it to 3% by doing a series of simple tests. You just increased your revenue by 50%. And here's some examples. So these were just basically, for example, we're testing a different message on an action button. So instead of like click here, it would be like apply now, for example. And you can see the original conversion rate was 20%, and then we beat it with a different variation that had 23% conversion rate, which is an incremental increase of almost 16%. So you automatically make 16% more money just from a different button on the page, right? And then you test a different headline. Look, we got a incremental 35% lift from just a different headline. Remember copywriting, the books that I mentioned? Well, guess what? If you read those books and you implement what you learned, you can automatically get 35% out of nothing. So this is super powerful, and it's also a free tool by Google called Google Optimize. It's simple, intuitive to use. You don't need to be a genius to use it. Some more tools, free or paid. So like for instance, I haven't used personally Canva, but it's like Okay, we're back. Hopefully 3 times as a charm, and we're just going through tools. So some of the other tools that I've used personally is, for graphics is Canva, or I use Paint.net, a desktop application. For video, I haven't done much video editing myself, like Filmora, something that comes to mind. There's other things. Really, we just outsource it. We hire a company called No Limit Creatives or similar. More on that later. For project management, there's different tools, Asana, Trello, that we use personally, and ClickUp is something that I heard recently as a really good tool. For tactical comms between team members, we use Slack, and all of these are free, by the way. For email, Zoho or Google Suite, or also known as G Suite, is very good. Really just simple Google Docs, Google Sheets, like all the free Google productivity tools are good to go. For domains, I used to use GoDaddy, but actually I found that Namecheap is cheaper, and especially on the renewals. So then, where to get additional help? So alluded earlier that oftentimes when you think of how do I do this, like you need to be thinking, who can do this for me? And you don't need a lot of money, honestly, to get help. I mean, good help does cost more, especially if you want like a full-time employee. Someone maybe in your office, somebody who's dedicated. But initially, when you're just starting out, I think getting some quick help will alleviate some of the overwhelm that you may have. Is like, oh my god, how do I do this? Or oh my god, this will take me forever. And like I had this epiphany once when remember I said like I built my first HTML page in 1997. But anyway, so like this was like probably 2014 or something. I was messing around with this WordPress page that I was building for one of my ad campaigns, and there was this particularly stubborn piece of CSS code that I just couldn't figure out. I literally spent like half a day on this, and then I said, you know what, screw it. I went on Fiverr.com, which is like basically starting at $5, you can find people to do gigs for you, and they call them gigs. And that person was able to fix that problem for me in 20 minutes for $5. I'm like, oh my god, I just spent 4 hours trying to fix this. So one of the regrets that I have is I wish I started outsourcing certain tasks earlier, right? And there's be tasks that you're great at, like your zone of genius, that you need to do yourself, but then other things that you either hate doing, or they rob you of your time, or they rob you of your joy, or whatever. Like those are the tasks you need to outsource, right? I mean, I have accounting training, but should I really be doing my own books as a CEO? Probably not the best use of my time. So with that, some of the resources that I found useful. So first of all, support your local veteran groups. Like there's got to be somebody in your circle who does web pages, who does social media, who does graphics, whatever. So support your own brothers and sisters first. Now, for outsourcing, for quick basic gigs, like I said, Fiverr.com is great. So something like transcribing, quick quick image, quick fix on the website, something like more like a one-time thing. Get like a t-shirt design made or something. Fiverr is pretty good. If you want the more long-term contractors, I use Upwork. I think at one point in time it was like in the top 10% of Upwork employers in Canada. That was a few years back. So it's a good marketplace, probably the biggest freelancer marketplace in the world right now. Of course, you got to be careful with screening candidates. There's quite a bit of bullshit artists there, like anywhere, but in general, it's a good source of like more long-term contractors. And then there's another cool resource, a local Canadian startup called Acadium.com. So for like a couple of $100, you can get an apprentice and you know